Welcome to the Info Mullet YouTube channel. If you enjoy this content, please like or share. And if you'd like to support the Info Mullet by becoming a mulleteer, visit us on Patreon. We appreciate your support. Jump over a little bit, change of pace to Bitcoin. And this actually if you go up on my Facebook for the Info Mullet, there's a review that's none too kind by a Tom Nancy. And the backstory on that is why I'm doing this Bitcoin piece today. So I was just browsing Facebook, innocently wandering my way. You know me, I never get in any fights. I never get in any okay. So I got onto an argument with somebody, my bad. It was about Bitcoin and electricity consumption. And this guy was a Bitcoin pumper. He was like, somewhere between the pedestrianness of a YouTube watch my video and you'll make millions and the obnoxiousness of grow your penis from home and it will change your life forever email. That's what this guy was doing in a thread. He's like, Bitcoin's awesome. There's nothing wrong with it. If you disagree with it, you're a silver shill. It's going to 120,000. And I called him out eventually as a pumper. Like, this guy's basically a scam artist. He blocks my entire conversation, so I can't see him anymore, which, that's just any given day on the internet for me. Someone blocking me, that happens. But then a minute later, this review shows up on the Info Mullet by Tom Nancy calling me a racist and all sorts of things. So it could be a coincidence, but I'm pretty sure it's him. And in honor of this Bitcoin pumper, I'm doing a special on Bitcoin electricity because it's been a topic for discussion, and it's come out because Tesla's made this big investment in Bitcoin, and it's raised the question of what is the trade-off consequence of Bitcoin from electricity consumption? Now, there's a lot of good questions that can come up with Bitcoin, and if people are interested, I'm happy to get into the discussion of fiat currency versus cryptocurrency, Fed inflation, privacy concerns, all of those things. But this one particularly, I'm going to stay fairly focused on Bitcoin. Oh, and if you have some Bitcoin, visit our store and buy some shirts. No. So I'm going to stay focused on the electrical consumption. So Bitcoin, the reason it's in the news from electricity consumption is there's this website. It's the University of Cambridge Bitcoin Electricity Consumption Index. It's a mouthful of a title, but it's only an acronym, and the link is below. Bitcoin is mined. So you think about paper currency. You make paper currency by printing it. Pretty simple process. And of course, these days, we make most of our dollar currency by going into an Excel sheet and adding a couple zeros. And, it's called, we just expand the monetary through the Fed. It's all digital. It's all virtual. None of it's really real, which is one of the reasons cryptocurrencies are popular, because the mining takes a tangible investment of resources, and it's a finite number of currencies. So that's all background. The resources for Bitcoin, it's computer-based processors, and that means electricity. And Bitcoin has now come on the radar as a large percentage, or a large consumer of electricity. Now, these numbers here are going to be put in context. First of all, total worldwide electricity production, 25,000 terawatts. So Bitcoin's just 0.5% of that overall. And these are 2016 numbers. So I think right now it's a little bit more closer to 8. Total, let's see here. Where am I looking at? Total, yeah, so Bitcoin's between 0.46 and 0.53 for energy consumption. And you can see this is around the world. It's the Bitcoin mining operations, because of the need for cheap, plentiful electricity, have begun diversifying. You used to do this in a computer, in a laptop in your basement. Not anymore. You need supercomputers now to be able to do this. And the reason why, and the reason this is important, goes to the core of Bitcoin itself. So if you're not familiar with Bitcoin's fundamental design, the way this mining works is there's an algorithm that you have to basically crack. And the difficulty of this algorithm to crack, and when you crack it, another Bitcoin gets produced. So you're basically doing computational password breaking. And it was set up years ago so that it would last for a long time and create a finite number of Bitcoins. But the key is each Bitcoin that is next mined is more difficult than the last one. So early on, it was very easy. You could do it with a laptop. Now it's basically high-end encryption breaking, and you need server farms to break this. And this doubling effect of this difficulty, this doubling effect of the algorithm created, and my guess is, an unanticipated consequence. This was started years ago. I mean, this has been going on for years, but now it's so hard. These server farms are needed, and you need tons of power because it's Bitcoin has hit the capacity of the processors. You cannot get faster processors to make Bitcoin easier to mine until we get to quantum computing. They have reached the limit of the processors, which means the only way now you can continue to mine Bitcoin and be effective and profitable is by adding more processors. So when you add processors in a server farm, there's a direct relation to the energy consumption. So if you think about it simply, you got a positive feedback loop. As the difficulty to mine Bitcoins doubles, the amount of processors you need to have doubles. I don't know if it's doubles, but it increases a lot. And therefore, the electricity you need also doubles. And it's this doubling effect that has caused Bitcoin electricity to spread so fast in its expense. And you can look at this. Here we go. This is a Bitcoin right now, the energy usage in 2019. Every country here is listed top 30 energy users in the world. So what does that 0.5% mean? It doesn't sound like much. 0.5% of total worldwide energy is more than Argentina, right? You are Bitcoin. If Bitcoin were a country, it'd be in the top 30 countries for energy consumption. And this is just this last year, 2020, 67 terawatts of usage puts it above Argentina. Well, the key here is not the point in time. So a lot of people, when they talk about this electricity, and you're talking about global warming and where is this energy coming from and what is the economic value of Bitcoin? Now, we got to split economic value from investor value. Same thing when we talk about Wall Street. Wall Street is about investor value, doesn't necessarily mean economic value. The economic value I'm meaning is the net aggregate economic benefit of Bitcoin. I won't doubt that if you're trading Bitcoin, you can make lots of money. You can be gold, diamond hands, Daddy Musk, woo woo to the moon. But the economic value of Bitcoin is still very niche. But its energy consumption is the equivalent of the entire country of Argentina. So is the economic value that Bitcoin provides equivalent to Argentina? Maybe, maybe not. But arguing what it is right now misses where Bitcoin's going. And this is this positive feedback loop that I was talking about and got me in trouble with this pumper. It's when you have a positive feedback loop, you're talking compounding and exponential growth. And we can see that when we go to the actual dashboard for the Cambridge study, and it shows the consumption in terawatt hours by Bitcoin. So this is that University of Cambridge Business School. It's the Bitcoin Electricity Consumption Index. I recommend it. Their methodology is transparent. They got all sorts of this stuff. But you can look here. So this is 2016 when they start. Their estimated terawatt consumption is 2.23. And they've got an upper band, medium band, and a lower band. That's what these three numbers are: gray, orange, and yellow. I'm going to use the medium band, right? The medium estimate of consumption. So from 2016, right? February of 2016, here we go. Let's see. Yeah, so 5.7 to February of 2021, and these are updated every 30 seconds. The midpoint estimated consumption is 124 terawatts. That means in 5 years, the energy consumption of Bitcoin has doubled 5 times. That is the risk of Bitcoin consumption, electricity-wise. Not where it is now and the percentage of what it is now, but that every year it seems to be doubling. In 5 years, it's doubled 5 times. If this doubles again, it's going to be 260 terawatt hours the next year and 520 after that. Now, things don't double forever. There's always limits, but that means, and for those that sounds familiar, that's what makes COVID-19 so dangerous. You can look at it at a point in time and say, oh, that's not that bad. That's only a limited percentage, but it's doubling, which means when you look at it next, it's going to be twice what it is. And this is why, you know, people ask, well, what is the US currency? What does it take to produce US currency? Well, I looked it up. And the US currency is, there's only 2 places that print currency. It's in Fort Worth, Texas, and Washington, D.C. Those 2 facilities combined, I think, use 53 kilowatt hours of energy. 53 kilowatt hours compared to terawatt hours, it's 0.01% of the Bitcoin energy is used to produce the paper currency. And the important thing is that it's not growing at a doubling rate. We print currency only to replace currency as it gets damaged or worn or it goes out of circulation, it gets lost, we print more currency. And this is, a lot of people are arguing, well, other things are more or less or different. But the key thing is very few things have a doubling growth for long. And most of the established aspects out there don't have this doubling factor. So Bitcoin is right now slightly beneath the entire transportation sector worldwide electricity consumption. When it doubles, it will be over it. And the question is the economic benefit of Bitcoin more or less than all global transport worldwide? I'm going to say no. I'm just going to go on a limb here and say no. It doesn't mean that it's not a valid use to hedge against inflation or that there's valid anti-privacy things. And the reason why it does this is it's trapped into the cycle. This is not something that Bitcoin can avoid. You go back to that design, it was built to have every next coin be twice as hard, effectively, to mine as the last coin. And we've reached the point where we can't increase processors anymore. We can't double the processing computing power as well as we used to, which means we have to add more processors, which means we have to add more electricity. So the foreseeable future, Bitcoin's going to continue to consume energy. Now, there's other cryptocurrencies out there that are more recent and don't have this flaw. They're not as energy intensive. And I'm not going to get into a specific nuance to, I don't trade, full disclosure, since we're talking financial things. I don't have any financial stake in any cryptocurrency or any commodity. The only thing I have is SPY, Spider Fortune 500 index funds, right? It's the most boring thing you can do. Dollar cost average over time. It's almost the effectiveness of a blind account, except it's not even as interesting as a blind account. I have no financial stake in this. I'm just looking at this as a system scientist and saying Bitcoin is going to continue because it's now $40,000, $50,000 a coin. That financial incentive remains, and a lot of people are chasing that. As they chase it, the percentage of energy that Bitcoin consumes of the entire worldwide electricity production continues to gobble more. And that leads to the development of new power sources, which may or may not be renewable or very carbon friendly or carbon mitigation friendly. And this is something that Bitcoin's going to have to address. If it wants to answer its promise as being the new currency for everything, well, you can't have a reserve currency that, to get it, continues to require a doubling of electricity. The US global currency doesn't consume. Now, once the currency is made, then it gets into the transaction. And we're not talking transaction or what it takes to manage the stock exchange or trade stock. That's already baked in. We're talking just what it takes to produce the currency itself. And that's where I think you're going to see a lot of articles on Bitcoin, and why the Bitcoin is going to struggle is, it may very well be a good investment. People who buy it may make money off of it, but as a economic thing, it's hard to justify a doubling of electricity consumption for an economic advantage that doesn't really feel like that. Wow, so let's go through some of the questions here. One Myanmar question: does Myanmar own the Andaman Islands? China would like to rent them, I'm sure, to control access to Bay of Bengal. I'll have to look into that, Mike. I'm not sure off the top of my head whether they control it. On to Bitcoin questions. Bonky Con shills unite. Yeah, so Mike is pointing out that Bitcoin has pushed a surge in video cards because the video cards are good for mining. Video graphics cards themselves have processors in them. They're very specialized processor cards for high-end graphics that do a lot of numerical computation. Well, Bitcoin mining requires numerical computation. So video cards and they're energy hogs. They've got their own processor. They've got their own fans. You don't put a fan on something unless it's generating heat. It's not generating heat unless electricity is going through it. Lucas is asking, do other cryptocurrencies work similar to how Bitcoin does with regards to farming? As far as I know, the newer ones are different. And this is where I want to be careful, because I'm not an expert on Ethereum or Dogecoin and all. I think Dogecoin's a joke. I'm not sure. I'm going to probably find out in the comments that it's not the joke, but the most serious thing ever. But all these other coins, some of them I have heard are more eco-friendly because they took into account the design. I remember Bitcoin was designed in the early 2000s. It was designed 15 or so years ago. Some of the more recent cryptocurrencies, I think, have taken this into account, but I'm not going to guarantee that, Lucas. Yeah, Ed's mentioning that Bitcoin miners in Texas are going to have to spend a few Bitcoins on their power bill this month. Actually, Ed, most Bitcoin farmers in the US have moved literally to the place of power generation. So like the hydro dam in eastern Washington, it's a very rural area on the Columbia River. This is the Columbia Basin. It's traditionally a farming area. They've had Bitcoin miners relocate their server farms right next to the power station. So, I don't know if they're building their Bitcoin server farms right outside the oil refineries, but I have a feeling they're going to be closer to producers of electricity and the power grids, not just necessarily the oils and stuff like that. Yeah, Ed is saying that Doge and Ethereum are better at some of the electricity consumption. I can't verify that myself. Mike's asking, cracking an algorithm, who is producing the encryption? So are lessons learned being gleaned from the encryption community? I don't think so. I think the algorithm is kind of one of these mathematical exercises where if you create a mathematical equation, I'm going to speak very broadly here because I don't want to get too far out on the ice that I'm going to fall through. But basically, you can talk about P versus NP problems, and some of those scale well for algorithms that once you solve them, they get very easy to solve. some of them do not scale, and they continue to be harder and harder each time you add an increment. If you look up traveling salesman, that's an NP problem. It means that even though it doesn't seem like it should be that hard, it's insanely difficult to crack. So I'm not sure if this is getting into better encryption methods, or they're using the latest state-of-the-art encryption methods, or and it may not even be encryption. I'm saying hacked. I'm using that word. That may be the wrong word. It may just be mathematical processing, a sheer number of computations, which creates an outer limit to what these processors can handle. Yeah, some are saying cancerous growth of energy consumption. That's the risk here. Yeah, Ed's pointing out that the algorithm was created when the coin was created. So this algorithm has been in place for years now. Satoshi is the one who's credited with it. Talking about the big push for CPOs is efficiency, the big push for GPUs is raw power. So, you know, yeah, Ishmael's talking about high energy farms. I didn't realize Bitcoin would be so popular. I should talk about cryptocurrencies more often. Are cryptocurrency algorithms that are launched into civilization-wide economic calculation system and evolve as emergent entities? That's a mouthful. Let me read that again, Ian. Are cryptocurrency algorithms launched in a civilization-wide economic calculation system and evolve as emergency entities? I don't think there's an, so when we talk about emergence, and this is going a little bit into complex systems here, and I got to pause here to get to Iraq and Russia because they're burning too, but let's talk about Bitcoin first. When we use the phrase emergent, emergent is where you have a collection of small definable properties that when they begin interacting create a property that is not reducible or discoverable back from the properties which combine to create it. So what an emergent property is you have something that itself cannot be easily discerned from the component parts that made it. You know, the term synergy is greater than the sum of its part. Well, the term emergent means non-detectable from the decomposition of its parts. And so something that has an emergent property, you can use an example here that I use a lot. There is the concept of the military, right? The US military, the component parts are soldiers, US soldiers, uniforms, tactics, TTP. You can break it down into many, many different parts. But the way those parts interact create something about the US military that itself is not reducible down to any one of those parts. And it's in how you can tell the difference between the French military and the US military and the Canadian military and the Myanmar military. These are distinct emergent properties that have emerged, and complex adaptive systems are famous for creating these emergent properties. The cryptocurrencies, as I understand it, are not emergent. We know the property that's going to be of this mathematical calculation. We know it's going to be complicated in the future, more complicated than it is, but it's not going to have an emergent property from the cryptocurrency itself. The mining is still going to be how many processors you can throw, how efficient, how much raw power to do these calculations. That is a known quantity. There is nothing emergent from it. But when cryptocurrencies get released into a human system like the economy, everything in the economy is an emergent system, right? Complex adaptive systems, that's the definition of human activity, especially economies. The release of the cryptocurrency will have emergent properties, and this is where we talk about unforeseen consequences and unanticipated consequences, is sometimes these emergent properties, which you cannot detect from the component parts, end up really biting you in the butt. And so that may be, and some of them may be very beneficial. You never know. That's the trick with emergent. And emergence, another way to think of emergence is if you stand right now at the present and look forward, you cannot tell what the future is going to hold. But if you stand in the future and look back, you can trace all the individual things that happened along the way. The fact that we're talking about Bitcoin and not Bobcoin is an emergent property that of all the innovations with cryptocurrency, the Satoshi one happened to be the one that got picked up. You can go back in 2000 and you would find people talking about these cryptocurrencies and stuff like that, but this one happened to have the right combination and it emerged. And you could go back and look and see, well, it seems very clear, but if you were standing at 2000 and say, what would be the dominant cryptocurrency in 2021? No one could predict Bitcoin, and they might not even be aware of this electrical consumption problem. These are the emergent properties of the cryptocurrency within the system, but the cryptocurrency itself, the mining, I don't see that as it's a complicated system, but not a complex system. And Mike's asking, at some point, are there no more Bitcoins to be earned? This is true. There is a finite limit to the number of Bitcoins determined when the algorithm was put in place, and that's why it is a hedge against a fiat currency. Its theory is it's like gold. There's a finite number of gold in the world, although that's a bad thing to bet on because there's always finding more gold. But Bitcoin was designed from the beginning to have a finite number of coins that could ever be mined. And once you hit that, that's the limit. There's no more coins available. And what you're using then is smaller and smaller decimal fractions of existing coins to divide and make transactions. So thanks for watching the video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to follow the Info Mullet, visit us on Facebook or Twitter. And if you'd like notifications when we post new video content, click on the red subscribe button below the video. If you've ever wanted to become a muleteer and support the Info Mullet, visit us on Patreon. We appreciate the support.